YouTube. Welcome back. For any newcomers, my name is Josh James, and on this channel, we talk about real life, real lessons, and real adventure. Alright, this is not a story time. So in my last video, I talked about my first life, right? And this video is supposed to be on the second life. But there's a lot of bleeding between the two. So I'm gonna have to set the scene for my second life. I'm gonna have to go back to the first for just a little bit. Okay, clarify some things. So this is gonna be of my 1.5 life, right? Before we go to 2. Okay? So I said in my first life, right, at this point I had an epiphany and I was gonna go into the military. Right? So let me take a step back. I told y'all when I was young and I was living in downtown New Orleans in the Lafitte Project, 6th Ward, I fell off the balcony. Right? So when I fell off that balcony, I fell into an ant pile. And the doctors told my parents, you know, my mom and my daddy, told them that that ant pile likely saved my life. If I wouldn't have fallen in that ant pile, if that ant pile was not in that exact position and I didn't fall on that ant pile, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you today. So that ant pile saved my life, right? I told you I am a religious person. I ain't gonna drown you with it, but I look back at that, and at that time, during my first life, I saw that as divine intervention. So that's number one, right? God spared me. Okay. Next, I told y'all Hurricane Katrina, I evacuated to Houston and I graduated high school up there, right? So while I was in high school, my last year, the Army recruiter came down, active duty Army came down, and the school was giving people the ASVAB test. If you don't know what the ASVAB test is, you have to take and pass this test in order to go to the Army, right? Depending on how you score on this test depends on what jobs you can possibly take when you go into the Army, what's available, you know what I'm saying? But you have to pass this test. If you don't pass this test, you cannot go to the Army, all right? So I had no intention on going to the Army, but like I told you, you know, I'm a hustler and I stay scheming. I like to have a backup plan. I like to have something in my back pocket. So I told myself, you know, I don't want to go to the military, but hey, you know, let me take this ASVAB test and see if I pass. If I pass it, that could at least be an option. I could put that in my back pocket, you know what I'm saying, as a backup plan. So the school gave the ASVAB test to certain students. I don't know how the students was picked. I don't know how many, whatever, right? So I didn't get the opportunity to take the ASVAB test. So I'm at school one day and I walk up to the recruiters. They had a little recruiting table set up in the cafeteria. So I go talk to the recruiter like, hey, I know you guys came down. I know the school gave ASVAB tests, you know. I wasn't given an opportunity to take the ASVAB test, but I would like to take it. You know, how can I go about doing that? And the recruiter told me, man, I can give you the ASVAB test. Here, take my card, give me a call. I can come to your house and give it to you. Let me know when you're available, right? So I gave him a call. I don't know how much time went by, but gave him a call. He came to the house, talked to my mom's, gave me the test. I went into my bedroom with the computer. I took the test. I passed it, right? So I was 17 at the time, right? You needed to be 18 to go to the Army. You can go in when you're 17, but your parents needed to sign a waiver, right? So I took the test. I passed it. So the recruiter like, okay, what do you want to do? What job are you trying to look into getting into in the Army? And me, I told you I was in the streets. I'm young and thugging at that time. I wanted to go infantry. You know, I wanted to go to Iraq. I wanted to kill, cause havoc, and destroy. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to war. And I wanted the enemies of America to suffer, to punish, right? 9/11, all that. You know, I was already in the streets, you know, so I was already a highly trained for combat soldier at a young age. I was ready to go to war. I said, man, I want to go infantry. I'm trying to go to Iraq. Iraq was popping at that time, right? Afghanistan had died down already. So I wanted to go to Iraq and destroy, right? He said, all right, cool. You're 17. Your mama needs to sign a waiver for you to go. So I was like, all right. I talked to my mama. I said, hey, Mom, when I graduate, I passed the test. I want to go ahead and go to the Army. I want to go infantry. My mama said, boy, I ain't signing no waiver for you to go. You ain't going to no damn Army. Go sit your little mop head down somewhere, boy. What you talking about going to the Army? Go sit your ass down, boy. So I'm over here like that. She called me mop head, right? Because I had dreads at the time. I had dreadlocks all the way down to my shoulders and stuff. You get it? Mop, whatever, right? So I'm over here. I told the recruiter, man, my mama, she won't sign a waiver for me to go. He was like, man, you know what? It's all good. It's cool. Hit me up when you turn 18. And if you still want to go, we'll get the ball rolling. So I was like, bet. Right? So boom. Remember that. That's going to play a very important part in the future. But just put that in the back of your head for now. Okay? Fast forward. I told you I graduated from high school. I went back to New Orleans. Gave college stuff to stuff. I went back to the streets. Went back doing what I was doing. One of my friends got killed, B. Before he died, that was my ace boon coon. We was locked in. We was hitting the streets, man. We were tight. So my friend B, before he died, we was hanging real heavy. I'm talking like every day, riding around Kansas City, going downtown New Orleans, Canal Street, Bourbon Street, riding through the hoods, all kind of stuff, man. We were like this before he died. And I remember back then, Nextels was a thing. So we had the Nextels. We used to say chirp. We used to chirp each other out. Hey, B, what's up, man? What's going on? All day, every day, saying stupid stuff on the walkie-talkie. All kinds of stuff, man. We used to be having fun. So, how I found out about how he got murdered, I came home. I don't know what I was doing. But I came home, I was by myself. I was living with my cousin. My cousin wasn't even home. So I get there, and in New Orleans, there's a lot of crime, a lot of shooting, a lot of murders. So what I used to do, I used to watch the news, just to see, who got shot, who got killed, on the news. So I'm at home chilling, I'm watching the news, and they're doing a story on a shooting that happened in Kansas City, where I'm living at the time. So, reporter talking, they're explaining the shooting, and I'm looking, and how they do in the news, they showing the little crime scene placards, the bullet casings and stuff, and by one of the crime scene placards, they had a fitted cap. It was all black fitted cap. It was a Rockaware. I know some of y'all remember Rockaware, right? Rockaware was a clothing brand. It was an R. And when the R come down, that R turns into a W. And that was one of B's favorite hats. Because me and him, we used to dress in all black all the time. That was our thing. We'd be in all black, right? So this was an all black fitted cap laying on the ground. And I said, man, that looked like B cap. Right? Let me call this dude. Let me make sure, they ain't him. Everything cool. So I get on the next tab. I'm chirping him. Hey, B, what's up, bro? Where you at? No answer. I'm chirping him nonstop. What's up, man? Where you at? I just want to make sure that you okay. Hit me back. I never got an answer back. I'm calling my cousin. No answer from my cousin. And I'm like, man, what's going on? I hope it ain't them. I think hours passed by. I ain't really think nothing of it. I brushed it off. A couple of hours go by. Well, I think maybe an hour and a half. I get a call from my cousin. My cousin say, hey, look, get everything out of the house. The police coming. The police is going to be there. Get everything out of the house. And I'm like, man, what you talking about? He said, man, just get everything out the house. Click. Hung up the phone. So here I am, getting the stuff out of the house, right? Before the police come. The police never came, though. But my cousin walked in through the door, maybe an hour after that. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, man, what happened? And that's when he told me that our friend B got murdered. He was shot and killed, 17 years old. I'll never forget that. Anyway, so he ended up getting murdered at 17. And that's when I told you I kind of started going over everything. I had an epiphany. So I ended up taking that as divine intervention too. You know, I had nightmares. You know, I still dream about that, you know. And I saw that as God sending me a message too, you know, saying, hey, son, if you don't get your life together, if you keep going down the path that you're going to end up at the ground with your friend B, or you're going to end up in Angola, Louisiana State Penitentiary. Right? So at that time, I kind of had an epiphany. You know, I went back to Houston. I went back to go move in with my mama in Houston. My mama was still out there. I said, you know what, man? I'm going to take that as a sign. I'm going to go to Houston. I'm going to try to get this college thing another shot. Right? So, boom. I moved back to Houston. So, when I graduated high school from Houston, my mama lived in a separate part of Houston. She lived in what's called Cypress, which is kind of northwest Houston, south side of Houston, right? Northwest, whole different area, right? So when I moved back to Houston with my mama, she lived in a whole nother area. She was in Hockley, Texas, which ain't too far from Cypress, but there's a big enough gap. It is a difference, you know, a big difference, right? Different side of town. So I go back to college, you know, brick and mortar, I'm going in person, and it just ain't for me, man. You know, I'm there, I'm doing the work, I'm sitting there, I'm bored. College just wasn't for me at the time, you know. And plus, I'm in Houston, so they got a lot of New Orleans people out there because a lot of people got evacuated over there. So I end up hanging around New Orleans people, you know. Ended up doing the same things that I was doing in New Orleans. I ended up doing in Houston because I'm around the same people. I'm in the same environment. And some of them Houston dudes, they was on the same time we was on in New Orleans. You know, so it was like, yeah, I left New Orleans, but I was still in the streets. You know, I found myself going back doing the same stupid stuff that I was doing in New Orleans I was doing in Houston and in Texas. Them boys wasn't playing out there. It's a complete different ball game in Texas. They don't play out there. So, you know, over a while, stopped going to college. You know, I'm back in the streets again, like I said. And I'm driving. I had a 1992 Honda Civic. I'll never forget that car. That was one of my favorite cars, all white. 1992 Honda Civic. I go to the gas station, right? Quick story real quick on that, right? This Honda Civic that I got, it had a busted radiator. So it used to overheat all the time. So what I used to do, I ain't have no money, man, you know? I used to have to carry a gallon of water in the car. So whenever I go somewhere, I could probably make it one way. But once I get to my destination, you know what I'm saying, my engine started overheating because the radiator's busted. So whenever I get to my destination, I cut the car off, I pop the hood, you know, let it cool off a little bit. And then when I get ready to go, I take my gallon of water and I put it in the radiator. But I had to let it cool off. I learned that the hard way, right? Because you try to take that radiator cap off a hot engine and all that hot water starts pouring out all on my hand, on my chest. I think I still got scars on my chest and my arm for doing that. Young and dumb. Yes, I know. Okay, young and dumb. But that's what I had to do. I had to wait for the engine to cool off enough for me to take that radiator cap off. And then I take that little gallon of water, pour it into the radiator, and it'll cool off enough to get me back home or wherever I'm trying to go. Love that car, man. Anyway, back to the story, right? I go get gas. I'm at a gas station at Exxon. I never forget that, right? I'm on a whole nother side of town, right? Whole nother side of town than where I graduated high school from. So boom, I'm at the gas station, I'm pumping my gas. I look over, a few pumps away from me, I see a soldier in camouflage. He see me, I look at him, I peep him out. Tell me why this the recruiter from high school. The same dude, same soldier, on a completely different part of town. What are the odds of running to this man? Right? So I walked over to him. He looked at me. I said, hey, what's up, man? You remember me? He looked. He was like, yeah, I remember you, man. I came to your house. I gave you the ASVAB. He said, you should be 18 now, huh? You trying to go to the Army? I said, man, look. I said, man, I'm over here. I'm out here. I'm trying to do the college thing, you know. But if the college thing don't work out, give me your card. I'll give you a call. I'll go to the Army. He said, all right, bet. He gave me his card. I took it. I put it in the ashtray in my little Honda Civic. And I left it there. And I said, you know, it's going to be my backup plan. Right? All else fails, I can always go to the Army. Right? So there you go. My first epiphany. God spared me from falling off the second story balcony in the project. 2, I took that as a sign for God. When my friend B was murdered, you know, that was my future. Divine intervention. 3, I ran into this recruiter. So now that's in the back of my head now. You know, I really need to get my life together. So, like I said at that time, the time I ran into him, I was still going to college, but I ended up dropping out, of course, going back to the streets, you know, young and thuggy. So I got to the point, I was sitting in my car, and I opened up that ashtray, I looked at that card, and I said, you know what, I think it's time. I think it's time. You know, God is telling me that this is where I need to go. Right? Not only were those 3 interventions there in the back of my mind, he also spared me from Hurricane Katrina. You know, a lot of people died. A lot of people died. And I survived. You know, so God was on my mind heavy. You know, I took that card out. I gave that recruiter a call. And lo and behold, he tells me, man, look, your ASVAB test is still good. You ain't even got to take the ASVAB test. All you got to do is say the word. And I get you in. Right? So I ended up making a move on that. I didn't end up going infantry. I started thinking, I said, man, you know, what if I don't like the Army? Or what if when I get out of the Army, you know, what am I going to do with infantry experience? Yeah, I'll be able to go over there. I'm going to combat. I'm causing chaos, mayhem, and destruction. But how is that going to help me in a civilian world? So I started thinking, you know, what else am I interested in? You know, my hobbies. And one of my things was guns. I've always loved guns. I fell in love with guns at a very young age. You know, I shot my first gun, I think when I was 12 or 13, I shot my first gun. I'll never forget. It was a 2-tone 380. It was silver and black. And I shot it in the air. And once I shot that gun for that first time, I fell in love with guns. I got my first gun when I was 16. And I've been strapped ever since. Trust me. Anyway, so I started looking at the jobs in the Army that the Army had, and I found this one job dealing with weapons. You know, I didn't want to be an armorer. I didn't want to just stash weapons in a vault. So I looked, and they had something called an armament maintenance technician. And pretty much what that was, everything that shot bullets, rockets, missiles, projectiles, the person with that job fixed it. I love guns. That's what I went in as. And believe you me, I had my hands on a lot of guns. I even tested future weapons for the Army, you know. So I ended up doing my research on that. I said, man, this is like right up my alley. You know, when I get out, at least I can be a gunsmith, be a contractor or something when I get out. You know, because all soldiers go to war anyway. You ain't got to be infantry to see combat. You know, they see the most combat. It's probably the most fun. But me being a hustler, the schemer that I am, I'm trying to think long term. You know? So I ended up picking that job. It was open. I got it. And I got off the phone with that recruiter. I got the ball rolling. And man, I was on a plane to Fort Knox, Kentucky. I think a week, 2 weeks later. I was on a plane to the boot camp. Fort Knox, Kentucky. The first time I've ever seen snow in my life was when I rode up to Fort Knox, Kentucky on that bus. Right? And that right there, I think that sets the scene perfect now for me going into my second life. And that second life is me going into the military. That was my transition from life 1 to life 2. Alright? So, I'll continue the story time series. We'll really do my second life this time, I promise. This isn't 1.5. I just felt like I had to set the scene before we go to my second life. Okay? So next video is going to be on my second life. Right? Until then, stay strong, stay sharp, and always keep moving forward. See y'all.